Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern-day deer hunter.
Right, yeah, see what I did, we got quite a bit of snow still on the ground here. You guys are a little farther south than us. I don't know how much snow you got, but we still got quite a bit, especially in the woods where we're at. So I've kind of been, I did quite a bit when we had that warm spell there back in January, and it warmed up, and I did some. And then we had, it was cold, but we didn't have snow yet, and I did quite a bit of grid searching some of the areas that I'd seen my biggest bucks in, and got a really cool video of like 80 deer coming by me.
No kidding.
And yeah, I probably got like 30 bucks that are still holding horns in it. It was pretty cool. I had a couple real big ones. I seen one of the deer that I passed earlier in the year, but I didn't see my big ones with them. I mean, there was some pretty good bucks in the group, but I still haven't had a chance to go into some of the bedding areas that I want to get into. I don't think they're there right now. Personally, I think they're probably, yarded up somewhere else, or they've dropped already. I'm just waiting for the snow to melt so I can go look and see if I can find some of the sheds, because, I mean, they're the caliber of deer. If you end up shooting, they're going to be absolutely studs. So
let's touch on I got us up and recording. Let's touch on the shed thing for a minute. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because I feel like as of the last couple of years, people beat it to death, and it, to me, is not that entertaining of a subject. But do you find value in what value is there in finding sheds for you aside from having them at your home and being able to look at them? I mean, obviously, they're super cool, and I get why people are into finding them, but do you have a direct correlation as to how that helps you in the next year pursuing deer?
Well, the only thing that I really get from it, I mean, besides, like finding a cool shed, I mean, it's kind of something to do when you're scouting and gives you, it takes up, it's something exciting that you can do, is knowing that the buck that you're chasing made it. I mean, you find them horns on the ground or a horn on the ground, and the caliber of bucks that maybe you didn't see in the season, or one you're chasing, he made it through, and you can kind of really start to go after if he's a target buck from last year, or like I said, if it's a surprise buck that drops. It's hard though, because the deer yard up like they do, that doesn't always mean that where you found the shed is right where the buck is going to be. So and especially with us holding hard horns right now, still, because I just seen a buck yesterday crossing the road. That was a real nice 10-point that he's still had both his horns. So it's hard because that deer might not be in your area. He just might have yarded up. He's somewhere in the vicinity, but if you're hunting public land, a lot of them could be on the adjacent private if there's any there. I mean, it just gives you an idea of what's in your area. So that's the benefit for me.
We should probably specify too. I mean, that'll vary depending on like your area, right? Like,
right.
If you're in a ag area or big woods, how far those deer will actually travel annually to like what you're saying. And I've seen the same thing. I can verify through, all my trail camera data right now that the deer they yard up. They come together this time of year, strength in numbers, right?
Right. Well, I mean, especially with we have a hard winter. I mean, we had the Arctic week or whatever that happened.
Right.
And those deer are basically one of the locations that I went through. There's a private cut bean field that the deer yard up in almost every year. As long, if it's bean or corns, it doesn't really matter. But those deer aren't in that area until late season, and even then, it's sometimes after season before they yard up like that. And then it's a good area to find sheds in, but you go in there opening day thinking, "Oh man, I found this great shed in here," and you even run cameras, and you know you would be lucky if you find a shooter on
Right.
camera or even see him there. So I don't really put a lot of stock into it. It's a nice, it could be a good late season spot depending on if we get harsh weather in
Mhm.
December. But if we have a mild winter like we've been having the last couple seasons, or it's an area that gets a lot of pressure, because most guys that see a cut cornfield or a bean field that's private, that's button up against any public, I mean, they're usually hunting it pretty hard. And so you, it can be hit or miss. I mean, it's something to keep an eye on. But like I said, I mean, it's February, almost March, and deer still holding their antlers, and where they're yarded up right now is not the areas I see the deer when there's season. You can actually tag out on one. So
So what do you
just
feel,
an inventory.
kind
You
of
know what I
like,
mean?
as a generalization, what do you feel like that distance is? I mean, is it a mile? Is it a couple miles? I mean, that those deer will relocate to. I mean, yeah, they're not, for the most part, agricultural and urban deer aren't moving 6 7 miles typically. I mean, that stuff does happen, but
Well, here in my area, because I hunt Central Michigan, so there is a lot of, even on the public, there's a lot of private crop fields. So those deer don't really have to travel too far in order to get to an area that's holding a lot of food. Like, I take my son out squirrel hunting, and it's a great way for us to walk around the woods and scout, um, and do some rabbit hunting, but to actually see if the deer are using an area. And there is one section of public that gets absolutely pounded, and bucks don't have a chance to really get any age structure in this area, because of the gun season pressure. But we found, on the oak ridges, um, we found probably areas that had 30, 40 beds on them, and they were just digging all the acorns out that they could find in this area, because there's not a lot of agricultural fields in this area. But that's kind of the yarded up to, and all the swamps were pretty much, you could see, single or maybe a couple of deer moving in the swamps, but for the most part they were bedded on the ridges where they could see, and probably have the wind to their advantage, but eating all the acorns on there. So I mean, it just depends on the area. I've not really hunted a lot of the northern area of Michigan,
mhm.
so I'm not familiar with, like, what they do in those cedar swamps and more coniferous areas. But here, they don't really have to go too far to find food source from an agricultural field. But if there is one that has cut corn or beans, any standing silage or anything like that, they'll be yarded up pretty much, 300-400 yards in the woods off that, all bedded in a circle. I mean, for the most part, it's
Bucks
really
and
hard to get close to them.
bucks and does. This time
Oh
of year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, because I mean, like I said, it was January. I think my video was from like January 7th. And I had like 80 deer go by me, and there was like 30 bucks in the group.
Mhm.
And they were all holding. And what's really weird is they didn't see me, um, where I was, and they came by me at like 20 yards, and there were bucks actually grunting.
Hmm.
Like, this is January 7th. I thought that was really weird, because I was like, I never seen bucks grunting. Like, they were like with the does, and I didn't know if there was some sort of maybe late estrus had popped, maybe a young one had popped that late. I've never seen anything like that. But we've also seen, in some of the scouting that we have done this year, some spots where it looks like there's some bloody piss, uh, from some deer that we've seen. Uh, I mean, I can't confirm that 100% because I'm not testing it, but I sure don't look like the normal stuff
Hmm.
that you would see. So it was kind of surprising. But what these deer had done is they had dug out their beds in the snow, and we had quite a bit of snow. It's starting to melt now, but um, they dug them right down to the ground, and these beds were like big. They had hair in them. I mean, they were pawed right out to the actual leaves on the ground, and they were huddled pretty much in a big circle, kind of off a slight rise, and you couldn't get really close to them. Because I kind of went back to do a little bit of like sit back, maybe a couple hundred yards, and try to film some of them, see if there was any big deer in there. And as soon as one of them spotted you, they all were. I mean, also all you could see is tails and racks going through the woods. So it was kind of a nice way to inventory deer. But I don't put a lot of stock into it unless we, like I said, unless we have a heavy snowstormed winter. Because those deer have so many areas that they can go to for food sources, and a lot of times the swamps, with a mile, they'll still bed in them, but uh, it's usually after season that I start seeing them yard up. So just a good way to inventory, I think.
Right. Yeah, I've found a lot of value as I grow as a hunter and a trail cam hobbyist. I find value in a lot of value in after the season with cameras, not as much, like just for what you just said, for inventory reasons. You used to be able to go put a little bit of bait out in front of it, and you'd get some night photos and have good idea. And I guess you won't be doing that going forward, but still, in the snow, it's pretty identifiable what the winter travel patterns are, so you can set those cameras up on those patterns, and I've got a pretty good idea of what deer are going to be around, provided that they do survive the winter and they don't fall, to a car deer accident
Right,
come
right.
come this year. And I've taken a lot of value in that, just because simply pace of life. If you don't have time to get out there and get that inventory, but I'm kind of thinking I might put some boots on the ground and do some scouting today. So that kind of leads me to like our first. We'll go in depth on both of these, but I think we should probably split them up because they're probably going to be different and unique approaches in their own way. And one would be spring scouting, uh, a previous hunting spot, stuff that you have history of, that you kind of know the area, and then one would be spring scouting brand new turf. Be it you're going to a new public piece, you acquired a new property, you're traveling out of state. I feel like, and I would guess that you'd be on the same page with me, that more and more people are looking at new hunting, turf with the rise in mobile hunting and people being
Well,
aware
you
of
got
public land. So I
Onyx
think we should,
maps.
yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? That places, things like that, applications now that afford a lot of, you know, guys who are in search of whatever trophy they're after. The You can look now and see all the new public pieces that have bought up. You can see the lay of the land, the terrains, the entrance exits of parking lots and would access them. So I'm 100% with you. The guys that I know that are starting their scouting this season, a lot of new areas that they've never been into or states are getting scouted. A lot more probably from the cyber aspect of it first, and then I think boots on the ground afterwards um, is kind of what a lot of guys, at least I know, are doing, trying to put the pieces together and see if areas are holding the caliber deer that they're searching for.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's what I do. So,
So let's just do this. I'll let you take whichever one you want first, and I'll just let you run with it. And I'm just kind of going to sit back and interject where needed if I have a question or whatnot. But I mean, you want to start on what you're doing this year for new pieces or what you're doing this year for revisiting existing pieces?
well, since we kind of conversated a little bit about the like previous, like just with the deer being yarded up, I'll just stay on topic with that and give a little more in-depth detail. So for me specifically, I chased a couple really good bucks this year. And I am pretty much trying to locate if they're still alive, number one. And I haven't heard of anybody shooting them, or I haven't seen any photos. And I'm on almost every sports sportsman channel on Facebook or Instagram. I haven't seen a single picture posted of them, and I would have. These are unmistakable bucks. So I mean, I think I would have seen them by now, or
Sure.
heard from somebody in my area that
Unless they
shot
were,
them around
yeah,
here,
or unless they were
unless they were
poached,
poached. You know what
right?
I mean? Yeah, and I don't think that's the case. But I will pretty much what I'll do is I'll Google Earth, because I save a lot of my stuff on Onyx maps that I find. So I use Onyx when I'm scouting. So as long as you have service in your area, every time I find something that's worth looking into, I will save a waypoint on my Onyx map. So I know I don't like to, I don't know, like forget certain things because it is hard sometimes in the season, always remembering every
Yep,
little spot.
for
But
sure.
whenever I have an encounter, I'm saving those pin drops, my waypoints of, a buck of the caliber I'm after. And, in season, it's nice because you can kind of pull back from that and see all the little pin drops in the areas that you've seen them. And it gives you a pretty good visual too of a deer, outside of the rut, but of that you start having the encounter. And so, a lot of guys will think maybe mile by mile block of timber, and they'll think that that deer is just going to stay. He's somewhere in that mile by mile here in Michigan because of the pressure. And so many, whether it's the agriculture or food source shift, a lot of different things that happen. Um, he can be in the next mile block over, and we've seen it, specifically where I can bounce kind of from a bedding area to a bedding area in the next block over and catch that buck there on that day. And I haven't gotten any direct correlational, like, hey, it was a northwest wind, so he was in this block, and it was a southeast wind, so he was in this block. Sometimes it could be the same wind, but he's in, a different bedding area off that side. But what the scouting part of it for me when I go in and look is, I can go in those areas, see first of all, because right now with the snow, track size is huge for me. Because if a deer has dropped, you can't really identify what buck it is unless it had some specific marking on it, or um, you know, it's kind of really hard. So I'm looking at track sizes using the bedding areas, or the sign that got left from last year, big rubs in a certain area. So when I'm walking through the woods, uh, I'm kind of noting every big rub, and I'm kind of looking at where the pressure comes in from as well. So I can either write that spot off for maybe it was a nighttime area, after hours, dark, where I couldn't kill them. And then I start looking, for scratch marks on trees uh, from other hunters. And then I'm trying to find maybe little pockets of bedding that I might have missed, because, especially when it's green, I mean, it's pretty easy to miss a small section, and it only takes just a few fragmites or red brush pocket in one area to he could have been bedded in there. I mean, it's hard to always put the pieces together on a new, or a piece you've been hunting looking for a target buck. But I pretty much scour the surrounding blocks. If I saw him in a primary area, I look everywhere. The pressure hits, I need to have all those locations kind of down pat. I'll spot check those in season to see if a rub line opened up, or if a scrape line opened up, or if tracks are leading into it, and it gives me a better indication of how I want to hunt that spot, instead of just kind of walking in blindly and only focusing on one little section or one big mile by mile section. Yeah, you might have all the bedding areas pinned down, but there's nothing that's restricting that deer to that mile by mile section. And a lot of guys don't look big picture when they look at that, and actually scout the surrounding areas for that target buck. And timing has a lot to do with everything. So if you have prior knowledge of an area, and you've hunted 2-3 seasons in an area, in one area during the second week of October always seems to produce a shooter buck or a buck you're after. You got to kind of keep that in your memory banks and know when you need to hit that up. So your scouting is is should be broadened more than just one little area. So if a big swamp that you're hunting, I hear a lot of guys talk to me and they'll continually pound that swamp. And I'm not saying that deer won't live in that swamp altogether, but a lot of times they will shift out of them for a lot of different reasons. Like I said, food, it could be a hot doe, it could be pressure. A lot of guys, it seems like now with the whole, I want to say that hunting bedding has really blown up in the last couple of years. And so guys aren't scared anymore to put a stand on their back and march a mile into a swamp and set up in the middle of a swamp. And you'll see them more frequently doing it. I see less guys hunting the edges and more guys kind of getting into them. And a lot of times when that happens and you've got a well-known buck for an area, that other hunters have seen, because you can't think you're the only person that's ever seen this buck, because there's so many hunters in Michigan. Someone's caught a glimpse of him, whether it was from, early season scouting, an accidental run in, what a car driving by, on the way
Cameras,
into hunting, cameras, anything. So you have to assume that there's other at least two or three other guys that know of this buck.
for sure.
And so a lot of times they have a lot of the pieces right, but they're hunting them incorrectly. And so they'll go into an area and blow out the bedding. Well, that deer, when he leaves, he's going to the next secure bedding area in a road. Deer aren't like humans where they see a road and think, oh, that's a barrier. They just go right across and go to the next, most secure place they can. And sometimes that's on private, sometimes that's on public. But you need to scout, all your area. And I like to look at it into like almost like a 4 mile block. Whatever block is adjacent to those bedding areas that looks like it's holding secure bedding, I'll go through and look at those even. And sometimes that's when I find the best spots because they're overlooked. Another aspect of it that I try to do too, and it happens in season, but it relates over to my postseason scouting, is knowing where all the pressure is located. So like, let's say you and I hunt the same block of timber and you see a great buck. Okay. I don't know how many guys are in your hunting party. So how many of those guys did you tell about the great buck you've seen? And now how many of those guys have went to this area and hunted it? So the area might get saturated one year. And let's say your buddies don't see that buck, but they see a couple other decent bucks and they shoot them. Well, now that area is more than likely not going to hold the caliber deer that you're looking for. It's got so much pressure. The kill's been so hard there. That those surrounding areas, maybe a mile down the road where there was a small parking lot that maybe 2 years ago got hounded, but nobody's hunting it and it gets overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be the area that I really key in on and go in there and look and see, do I see, good rubs in the area? And, one of the things I'm explaining to my kids right now is they'll find a rub on the tree and know it's a 2.5-year-old rub. And I'm like, don't write that off, because this year, if he made it, that's a 3.5-year-old.
Right.
So if he made a real good rub this year on that tree this last year, I mean, he has the potential to really he could be a shooter this year. So we don't ignore that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, your big, huge rubs that are on thigh-sized trees and it's more than blatantly obvious that it's a buck that's not a younger deer making that rub or in that area. Yeah, it's great to key on that, but I also like to keep track of all of the areas and the up and comer deer, because sometimes they blow into a shooter. You don't. It's so I try to keep track of the pressure from area to area on public land, because a lot of the overlooked areas for a year gave that buck another year to grow. So if there was a 2.5-year-old in there 2 years ago and he slipped out, and then the next year no one really hunted it, he could be a 4.5-year-old buck this year. One well worth a tag, but it got overlooked. And so if you go in there postseason and start finding it, it's absolutely ripped up. You're finding the beds, are good bedding, and you can make a game plan. A lot of times, I go in there and kill a buck in that area. And most of my bucks on public ground have come from areas like that. But that's a little different one after a specific buck, that's a target buck. You're specifically going after a buck you've had history with. Um, so it's a little different, but it's just something that I tend to pay attention to, because I think some guys get caught up. It's my favorite spot, or this spot's always been good to me. And I'm not saying ignore them, but don't ignore the other adjacent bedding areas that are on that specific block of timber, and don't let a road or any sort of barrier stop you from thinking that those deer could go over there, because a lot of times they do. Um, so that's kind of something that I really have been paying attention to the last few years, and it's really helped me because, like my son this year, um, we scouted a spot last year and in the spring, and Leon and I, and Leon lives like 2.5 hours from me, but he came all the way over here, and I had told him, I said, look, man, I've got some really, really good shooters, on video hitting this bean field. And I've seen it every year. Like, come this time of the year, I can drive out there tonight and there'll be 150 deer standing in this field. Like, it's where they always yard up, but it's private. And we wanted either rule out that they were going to be on the public, or, you know, find out where they might be. And him and I happened to stumble on a very overlooked piece that was maybe half an acre, maybe even less than that in size. But there were like 30 beds in it, and there were some huge, rubs from years, generational rubs that were in there, and a lot of good tracks that were there, even here in the beds. And you can tell it wasn't a doe bedding area. Does would bed in there, but it was primarily a buck bedding area. And I stayed out of there all year. Because of my son, we had some real good, we had about 400 or 500 inch caliber deer that were using that area. The problem with this one area is where the bedding was, it was so open woods to the bedding area with a slight ridge that you couldn't like sneak in there. You had to be a windy day or a rainy day, or, something of that caliber to get in there, because where you had to set up to get to it, you had to be within 100 yards to catch them in daylight, because it was right on the edge of a private field. Like, it was like really, really hard accessibility. And I knew having to get my son, 12-year-old son, in
Right.
there as well. He's probably not going to be as stealthy as what I am. And all the surrounding trees were oak trees. So, that when they drop the leaves, that all those leaves are going to be just crispy as, it's going to be like walking on some Doritos. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Right.
I knew. So I had to stay out of there. And then finally, we had a night where it rained, and it was really windy the next day. And I told my son, I'm like, if we're going to go in this bedding area, this is the day to do it. And because we had scouted it, Leon and I, and when I say we scouted it, though, we sat, just not only scouting it, but sat in the beds, looked at the runs. We walked around the trees, completely covering any angle we could. We dropped milkweed. When I had came back, I had stood on the ridge and dropped milkweed off to see which way, when the winds were, that the winds would swirl, because it was
All right.
surrounded by agricultural fields that were cut, and then there's a ridge off the back. So I knew that more than likely it was probably going to be a thermal tunnel down in there, and the wind was just going to swirl. So I needed to know how high we needed to get. I needed to know, everything. And I had literally sat down with my son and explained it completely. And he knew this area. He'd been begging me to get into it all year. And we slipped in early, and we saw quite a few deer that had come out of the bedding area, and they were smaller deer, younger deer. And then finally, about 15 minutes before last light, I had him to stand up, and because I was sitting with him, and it was camera light was a little rough because it was an overcast day, but you couldn't really get good footage. And when I stood up, I just happened to look, and he was already at like 20 yards walking to us. And I just told my son, he uses a crossbow. He was a little smaller this year. Now he had a growth spurt, so he's going to get a bow this year and actually use a compound. But he was using a crossbow, and he's looking off at like 40 yards. And I'm like, no, 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 no. He's like, right here, right here. I'm like, right here. As soon as he clears this bush, he's going to be in your shooting lane at like 7 steps. And I had just caught a glimpse of him. I knew he was a decent buck, but I didn't know how big he was. And then when he cleared it through, my son was, I mean, immediately it was like that comic book hat pops off their head, eyes are all bulged out. And he was like, oh, I mean, he was right there,
Mm-hmm.
put a great shot on him, and he ran up about 60 yards and fell over. And I immediately had called Leon, and I was like, dude, like, because when you have like-minded individuals who can think the same, it's nice to scout with people like that. It's another thing that I like to do. If you can trust somebody, another set of eyeballs with someone who knows deer movement is monster when you start hunting, because they can see things that you might have overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And Leon is the one that kind of, he found that little spot when we were scouting in it. And I've hunted this area for like 20 years and didn't know about this spot. And I don't know if it just grew up in the last few years, but it is without a doubt a spot that will produce when the time is right, year in and year out, because of how much pressure gets put on the private along with the public. And it's a spot that unless you walked up on it, you'd never know it was even there. And that came from our postseason scouting, and how, we went through and tried to dissect the area. And I mean, I tell you, when we dissect the area, I mean, you're looking at every parking lot. You're walking, even if it doesn't hold deer, you're walking those trails in to see where they lead to, where they go off at, if there's surrounding stands in the area. Um, you're looking at the wind, like, why would those deer be there? How frequent is there generational rubs in the area? You're trying to put every little piece together that you can. Um, to help from that success. So you need, there's nothing that you write off. Let's put it that way when you're scouting, like your acorn drop, your browse, every little thing that you potentially can. Sometimes new guys move in an area and they'll set a ground blind up, or maybe a ladder stand in an area, and maybe they're seeing the outside sign like a big rub, and so they hunt an area, and it will slightly shift the pattern of the deer. You know, if if you happen to be in an area hunting and you see a good buck, and maybe you don't get to hunt every day, you get to hunt maybe every weekend, and guys will pound that spot over and over and over. And if they didn't shoot the buck or didn't see somebody, more odds are that they'll be there. They'll leave that ladder stand there because it's a long ways back, or it's easier, and they'll be back there again. So you have to prepare for that, just like that guy was going to hunt there this year, because he's not stupid. He hunted there for the sign that was there, even though he might not have been able to kill that deer. You have to still, because the deer will shift. They'll move 100 yards away from that to a different location, still getting to the same food destination, uh, but they'll shift with that. They know that guy's there. He's
Mm-hmm.
probably not playing the wind. He's probably, his exit is the same entrance exit that, them deer can peg him down, and they get conditioned real quick
Right.
to that.
They do.
So from that standpoint, it's why we don't like to leave one leaf unturned. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times too, I see guys that they'll, because I've scouted with them, they don't take the leaves from underneath the ground and actually move them over off the runs to actually look at what the tracks are. Because they'll say, "Oh, the ground's hard," or whatever. Well, pull the leaves off of an area, maybe clear out, especially in the spring. Clear some of those leaves off of those runs that you think are, have, maybe there's a big rub on them, and so that way, if the deer start using them, you get to see some fresh tracks instead of just leaves on an area. We'll bring a little handheld garden rake with us,
Mm-hmm.
and actually like rake out like a 20-yard spot so that way you can see if there's four finger tracks going in an area.
Sure.
Or you know what I mean? It's just another little way that maybe it is real stupid to some people as far as, man, that's like going overboard. But I mean, it's the only way we'll ever see the tracks in those areas unless it rains and it's heavy. And then, a lot of times we don't have that after certain points of the year. And so I'm trying to figure out, is this deer still alive? Is he using this area? And I hear guys say all the time, like, well, those deer, once wintertime shifts, they'll make it back to the same areas that they were in earlier in the season. And here's the thing: if the food's not there, that's not true. Like, they're going where the food is right now. Those deer are not just shifted in at least here in Michigan with this snow to an area that they were in October 1st. If there's no food there, they're not going to be there. If there's food there, they'll be there. But, you know, so when we're looking into those areas that we have prior knowledge of, we're taking seasons of, you know, knowledge and information and trying to categorize it, for this season. How will that affect this year? This cornfield was, this field was corn last year, but we know it's going to be beans. So what happens when this field is beans with this bedding area? And a lot of, uh, they're not really thinking along those lines, and that's why I always say it's great to write stuff down and be able to compare from years to years. And most hunters have a pretty good remembrance. They can remember back and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember. But, you know, man, that there's a lot of times I don't remember every situation that needs to be. So I write it down. I'm a list kind of guy. And so when I write it down, I can go and compare it because, let's say one year that field was corn, but the acorn drop was really bad. Well, it will be different than when that field is corn and you have a great acorn drop. I mean, it could just be just something that subtle. Or uh, a few years back, the DNR had released that Asian beetle,
Mhm.
and they did it so it would tear off the red brush because the red brush was choking out a lot of the farm fields
Right.
and agricultural, and they wanted to get rid of this red brush. And so when there was red brush there, it was awesome because the deer would bed right next to the food source, and so they were so predictable. But then when that Asian beetle or whatever it was specifically they released, it ate all the red brush. So now the deer weren't bedding in those locations. So that happens in areas where certain food sources get destroyed by some sort of insect, or sometimes it's the DNR that get rid of them, or um, whatever it might be. Maybe they just get choked out because the woods gets too mature. A lot of things can change, so you have to be aware of what those are. And I think most people don't really know the native food sources that aren't acorns, corns, beets, whatever's in the agricultural field. They don't really look into depth of what kind of, like, if the deer will eat dogwood, if they'll eat some of the native grasses, or we call them nettles, but those bushes that you walk by that sting the crap out of you
Yeah.
when you hit them.
Yep.
Them things have flowers on top of them, and those deer destroy those.
Really.
And a lot of guys don't even look at that, but them deer we've watched them, even mature bucks, they will head to those because they're usually in areas where the security cover is tight, and no man is going to walk through them because it stings the shit out of you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but those deer will be there eating them. And so you have to really be paying attention to that browse and such. And a lot of times, yes, with the winter die off, you can't notice that, but you can with certain things like dogwood and whatnot, because you'll actually see where they've been eating and browsing off of it.
Mhm.
So knowing when you're hunting and we're talking about scouting for an area that you already have prior knowledge into, there's no way that you have every single piece of the puzzle put together, because it takes multiple seasons in order to do that. Like, literally. And I still in those areas get schooled from time to time because things change. You know, water levels sometimes and flooding can do a lot of damage in areas where it'll wash out bedding areas. Sometimes it'll create high points in areas where it pushes the sand or the dirt up in areas, and those deer will start using that because the wind floats through there to their advantage, or the thermals at their advantage. I mean, there's so many things and factors that people need to pay attention to, even in postseason scouting, um, from those areas because it changes.
Right.
And if you think about it, you know, think about an area that you've hunted for 10 years. Um, I know right now, if you look back, you'll know changes and seen visual changes that have taken place in that 10 years from where it looks like now compared to what it looked like then.
Sure.
And those deer change with it. You know, sometimes areas don't hold the food anymore or the security cover anymore. And so what once was a great area ends up burning out. And now, you know, it might hold younger deer, but it's not holding a mature buck. So, you know, that's why it's so imperative, I feel like, on hunting, you know, when you're scouting those areas that you know intimately or have hunted before, to piece them together, because when you go after a specific buck, you know, hey, I got this flat 10 over here, or whatever people like to name them. Um, and I don't really like getting caught up in naming deer, but sometimes if you're in an area like we were this year, I had three legit shooters in this area and one that was a really nice up and comer 3.5 year old. And we had to name them to keep them straight because I seen them almost every day. Every day I hunted it, I seen one of them. I wasn't always right on top of them. Sometimes they were an 80-yard encounter. I had two encounters this year where I snuck up on two of them that come back to bed in the morning, and we had such a variable wind this year that it ended up the same wind that allowed me to sneak up within 35 yards of them was the same wind that ended up busting me too. So it was tough, but I got a lot of really good information in this area on how the deer have moved this year through there, and it allowed me when I went in there postseason scouting to really dive in, and I found an area that I'm super excited in that it's so overlooked. No one can get there unless you go in from this specific place, and I see no one. It's hard to get to. Let's put it that way. And I have a feeling because of what I seen this last year, I I know if I sit there on the right conditions when the sign tells me it's right that it's going to produce a kill. I don't know. I can't say it's going to be one of the bucks that I chased, but I have a really good idea that it's going to be, because I've seen them come out of this bedding area numerous times. So it's just about, knowing everything that you need to know, all the variables on when you're scouting the same areas that you intend to hunt year to year. um you just need to know everything that is there. It's almost like, your living room. If you walk in and something's been moved out of your living room, you're going to notice. If somebody was sitting over in the corner hiding, you're going to notice. And that's how I approach deer as well. If to their bedroom, they're going to notice something that's out of place. I mean, how many times do you have that doe that comes in and she's that residential doe and you think you're just perfect, and all of a sudden she spots you from 30 yards and she's got you pegged and you know it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you're moving motionless, but they just know that they know differences, and it's even subtle like that. So you need to know their area just like they know their area. And you know that comes with boots on the ground, and I'm talking like, don't leave one section of that area that you're hunting or the adjacent areas that hasn't had your boots through it before summertime comes. You need to walk every single place, because the very place that you look at and say, I'm not going to go over there because I don't think any deer will be the very place that deer's living in, because every other man, woman that hunts is doing the same thing you're doing.
Right.
And if you think back, do you hear of a dad or a friend that goes out with a guy who's a real serious hunter in an area and gun season opening day, and he sets them 200 yards over in a spot, you know, that just to get him out hunting, and that guy kills the biggest buck he's ever seen. It's because that that you sent him over to that was like overlooked, and you kind of got put in a spot is right where that deer is at now because there's no intrusion over there.
Right.
So that's my biggest conversation that I have with people over that in scouting areas, is you have to know them so intimately, every aspect of it. And that's the most important piece above shining and seeing big rat fields. None of that matters because, I have camera footage of a bean field that is in one of the counties that I hunt, and I've got a 160-inch buck and a 140-inch buck that are in this field, and it's surrounded by public land. And come season, one of those deer was, we confirmed it. It was a 140-inch deer that got shot. It was a mile and a half away where that guy shot that deer.
Hmm.
But everybody and their brother wants to surround that little location because they think that's where those deer are at. But those deer shift, and you have to be prepared for that. And that's why I'm always stressing, know all the little areas, not just that area. You need to know, don't overlook that area, but don't think you're the only person that's seen them, because I scouted that spot and took my kids out there with my video camera. And for 2, 3 nights in a row, I sat up with, and no one even showed up down the road. And then one night I showed up on a Friday night, and there were 5 vehicles that showed up with hunters watching that field that knew about that buck.
Sure.
So, but if I wouldn't have came back and done that all those times, I would have never known that. I would have thought, oh, nobody knows about him because it's in a pretty secure little area. You wouldn't even, no one, who would think that someone would be here? It's even a dirt road. But there were lots of guys that knew about it,
Yeah. Sure.
and after talking with them, only one of them was the one guy I was concerned with that might actually kill him, because after talking with somebody, he knew his onions. And he knew. And he showed me some pictures of some good bucks he shot out of an adjacent swamp that was about a mile from that food source. And he said those deer shift, and I got a pretty good spot. So I kind of knew where he was hunting that. I never, he didn't show me, but when you look on the map, it's, and put boots to the ground, it's pretty easy to start to pinpoint those locations. And I know that guy was going in there, year in, year out, he's there. And
Yep.
it's not that, I'm not one of those guys that likes to hunt another guy's area. So, I just shied away from it. But, you know, it just shows you how far that deer can actually move when we like to put them in a small box. Like, we talk about core areas and how deer won't, bed far from them. Well, that's true. But that don't mean that their food source is close. It can be a long ways. What does it take a man to walk a mile? 15 minutes, maybe 12 minutes? You know what I'm saying? So you think a deer walking 10, 12 minutes or 15 minutes away or even 20 minutes is a long ways for it to go eat food? No,
Mm-mm.
not even close.
No, I've been surprised at seeing now that I have a pretty reasonable amount of cameras that I run. One or two cameras is great to take inventory of deer, but it does take a handful of cameras if you're going to use them kind of in the next level. And one of the ways that I do that is by staging them very far apart and actually seeing how far these deer are going, what specific deer are going from food to bed in these different areas. And it's it's been
It's
very,
shocking.
yeah, it's been very
It's
surprising
shocking.
to me to see how normal their travel patterns are just in a night. Where and how far they will go to get back to safe bedding and travel to the best food source. They will go a good distance.
Well, that's one of the things. I haven't ran cameras. Um, I think the last year I ran cameras was like 2008. And this year I'm getting back into it because I am doing some new locations, and plus I want to get some inventory on old locations, but or old areas, but new findings. And so what I like to do is, let's say you got a block of timber that's got an agricultural field to the west, and you got an agricultural field to the south, and maybe even got one to the east. Um, and it doesn't have to be connected right to that section of woods. But if you go in the summertime and you hang cameras right by the road crossings to those, and on each side of those that's on the public, but so nobody steals it, so you hide it, but it's on far enough away from the bedding that it's literally almost as close as you can get to those private fields without being in them. Maybe a road separates them, because they'll cross them roads no problem. You'll be surprised to see how far a buck will travel. The same buck will be to that field to the west one night, and the next night he'll be to the east, and the next night he'll be to the south. And but you'll start to pin down how one of those will start to be used a little more prevalent than the other ones. You know what I mean? It's just stuff like that but you'll see the area that a deer will travel and how far he will go.
Right.
Um and and I think we need to start educating more hunters on thinking outside of the box, like instead of thinking inside of the box, like I was talking, not restricting a deer to that mile by mile by mile stretch when he can go well over that to
Sure.
another bedding area, or another food source. So that for me has been a big eye opener. It's something that it's knowledge that we all know and take advantage of, and sometimes we need to stop taking advantage of those things that we think everybody should know, because not everybody knows them.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I think we could probably on that we could begin to shift into like looking at a new property, because the mentality of it all kind of carries over, right? Whether you're looking at something that you've been looking at for years or you're looking at something new, it
Right.
really does kind of boil down to just like you can look at everything at face value, and that's a lot of time. I mean, that's what I've done in the past. That's what a lot of hunters do, or you can begin to break it down. And I think what separates guys that get it done year in, year out versus guys that do on occasion or don't is that taking the information, and everybody can go out and get the information, right? Everybody can go out and look at everything and
Well,
take
especially
notes.
with the way technology has entered the hunting industry in the last 10 years, there's no reason that you won't have access to maps, to even reviews of areas. Or, I mean, you can key search an area and find conversation on many different forums of an area, and literally can listen to guys that have hunted it before. The DNR, even of the local areas or states, are a great way to call, contact them, talk to them about an area. They'll be honest with you, you know what I mean, and tell you a lot of really good information that can set you on an even better path than just saying, okay, well, I want to hunt Missouri, so I'll pretty much just pick a spot and go. um, the information is readily out there, available for you, even with reports now, kill numbers, buck harvest totals, counties in which Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett's were recorded. All that information is available at our fingertips now. It's such an easy. It takes 5 minutes to Google something now, and it might take you longer to dive into it, but it don't take very long to really start to key in on areas that, if you're looking at a new area, whether it's in state or out of state, to use. And to be honest with you, a lot of guys who are like minded now, on a lot of the forums, are more than willing to share information to a certain extent with hunters. And those hunting contacts that you make, that's why I always say don't burn bridges with people, because you never know when you meet somebody where your hunting endeavors will take you.
Right.
And that's something that's really opened up for me in the last couple seasons. Is I've kind of, I think, with the thrill of hunting new states, and then also with jumping into uh the hunting community and the industry with From Bed to Dead, is the social networking with other hunters or other outfits. And when I say outfits, I don't mean like an outfitter. I mean like the whitetail experience. A lot of different places, and you can YouTube so many videos now and see all of the hunters, whether they're a small little company or they're somebody big, and reach out to those people, and you'll find out that they love talking whitetails, and they're willing to share, maybe not their hunting spot with you, but sharing some knowledge of good caliber deer that would be located in an area. And then you can, along with what you find on the web, you can really start to pin down some really good locations to go and hunt.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that's what I was overall getting at is that everybody can obtain the same information. What separates people, I think, is what you then in turn do with that information, how you break it
Right.
down, how you look at it, how much you value it, because you can take it at face level or you can really go down the rabbit hole on every little individual line item and really break it down. And I think that's what is the difference maker for guys that do and don't have success.
Well, and that's one of the things. This last year I had a lot of surgeries. I had a cervical fusion on my neck. I had a cervical or a lumbar fusion on my back. I had a torn labrum, broken collarbone, and then I had a radial ulnar nerve surgery on my left arm from the accident that happened, and then I might have another scapula shape. It's a lower surgery. It's an arthroscopy, but it's still another one of those to have it. It's going to be a good 2-3 months before I can recover back again. And I'm hoping that I don't have to, but it
Yeah, for
really
for people that don't know, you got in a bad auto accident, right?
coming back from Wisconsin. Yeah, I was hunting in Wisconsin and got it was an older gentleman just hit me head on. He ran a red light. It was his wife was in the hospital, and it was just an accident. It wasn't a drinking and driving. It just was, one of those things that happens sometimes to people, and it really has changed my outlook on life. But also, I went through a really tough season because there's a lot of things I couldn't do this year, and it caused me to spend more time with my kids hunting than it did personally for my own self. And which was a really great thing, honest to God. I mean, it really was. And it actually helped introduce me to a lot of people in the hunting industry as well, because during my downtimes, I mean, I was going crazy. So I spent a lot of time researching, reading, picking the brains of people, you know, hours of conversations with a lot of respected people that I respect are in the hunting industry, but that maybe a lot of people don't know. And I got to network, and it's kind of I'd already been on the out of state. I went to Ohio and Wisconsin and been hunting those two states. But it put me on to the mindset where our time is precious on this earth, and while I'm younger and I still have the health, I want to be able to go to other states and be able to hunt with like-minded guys. And I also want the experience of being able to see what it's all about. We hear about Iowa and Kansas and Missouri and Kentucky and South Dakota, North Dakota, and all these great buck states to hunt. Indiana, Illinois, you name it. Um, and you it just caused me to say, am I going to let life pass me by and continually talk about it, or is this something that's really in my reach? And so, leading into us hunting new areas that we've never been to, it it really showed me uh, I could focus more on From Bed to Dead and the instructional part of what we're trying to do. And and then taking our video footage that we had last year and the scouting footage that we're doing this year and being able to edit it down and start releasing it out to people, which is going to be coming pretty soon, like really soon. It's just a lot of things been happening, and I know everybody, we try to keep as much updated and post as we can, but the real raw footage that's going to start is going to start coming pretty soon. I would say it's going to be, I want to say middle of March or May 1st of June, because I'm good at killing the animals, but I had no clue on how to run editing software or how to do some of the things. And I'm very thankful that there's numerous people that have reached out to me that have, offered their assistance to help. Um, but when you're going, and it's what I guess leading into the new places to scout, we're going to video the cost of breaking it down, like we're talking categoristically for do-it-yourself hunts. How much does it cost you to go for a scouting weekend, and hit another state? How much does it cost you for your license? What all permits you need? The areas that you're going to, food cost, can ways to save money and make a do-it-yourself hunt that maybe it was a dream hunt to go hunt Missouri, for somebody, or maybe Wisconsin or whatever, and make it realistic and affordable for a person who has a family like you or I, um, and doesn't have, you know millions of dollars, or is well off to the point where, you know money doesn't matter to them. And we felt like it was really imperative to do this because there's so many guys that are looking to take their hunting to the next level or take it out of state. And one of the biggest reasons, besides shooting a caliber buck that isn't as prevalent in Michigan, is for me is I love taking and finding a new piece of land, learning it, and the challenge that it presents of going in and killing a buck that you're looking for, and you know, trying to, for me, it's like a game, trying to make it as inexpensive as I possibly can, but also enjoy every moment of it as well. So um, we are going to many different states this year, but I have a scouting trip planned March 7th through the 10th, where um, Leon and Brandon Hobbs are coming along with me. It was actually Brandon's idea, in the area he found. But we're going to Missouri, and right immediately once the area was, picked, that we looked for, which was going online, finding out about, all the statistics of, you know, buck kills, how many hunters are in that area, all the little things that you look for. And then also, does it have agriculture? Is there a water source, or a river system through it? Is there swamps? What kind of terrain it is? What will we be hunting? And then also, you know, and this is just as important to me. If you've been a farmland hunter your whole life and you're really good at hunting swamps or marshes or flat land, you're going to be in a world of hurt if you go to an area that is hill country and you're not really up to par on wind currents and how deer use in hill country, and you're going to spin your wheels. So what we tend to gravitate towards are areas that we know how to read really well,
Mm-hmm.
and that we feel like our success will be good in. And so, some guys are great big woods hunters, and the big woods is something they love. So, that's gravitate towards what you do really well. And um, so that's kind of what we did. And we will be there. And I can tell you that from the moment it gets daylight to the moment that it's dark, I mean, we'll have our flashlights on. We are going to comb through every piece of this property. And it's a pretty good sized property. I believe it's close to 10,000 acres. So it's plenty big enough that we know that it's going to hold some deer. And see, we called outfitters around the area, Ask them, because Missouri is known to have EHD issues.
Hmm.
Ask them about the deer's bounce back. How long has it been since there's been a major outbreak? What areas of the state were hit hardest? Um, Etc. And then when I say outfitters, I mean actual people who are like paying to hunt their plate, because those people give you good information like that. I mean, they're managing their properties, but they know a lot more information than most people do because they're studying whitetails 24/7, just like you are.
Sure.
So if you don't have access to someone who hunts in the state, a lot of times you can get that good information from the local biologist, the DNR, an outfitter that's in the area, a guide, a sporting goods store. A lot, I mean, because you get a lot of information from people, and if you just get a little piece from this person, a little piece from that person, a little piece from this person, you can get a really good understanding of whether or not it's worth it for you to pay a $225 non-resident tag fee and whatever cost you're going to incur to go on this hunt.
That's a
And
great.
how successful are you going to be, or what are your odds, when you go there, and what caliber deer is a good caliber deer to look to take. Because if you have this mindset, like, I'm going to Missouri and I'm going there to shoot a 160-inch monster, well, that's great, and that's what everybody wants to do. But really, if a 130-inch deer walks out in front of you and that's a great deer, you know what I mean? You need to know what caliber deer is a great deer to take and be happy with.
Right.
Not just having this one mindset, like, I'm going to shoot a booner and that's all I'm going to shoot, or I'm going to shoot a 150 and that's all I'm going to shoot. Maybe realistically, that's not, the caliber of what a great deer is for that area. So, and that plays into how you pick an area too. You know what I mean? Like, for most guys, you don't really see too many guys in the industry banging on the door to come to Michigan and hunt, because a 100-inch deer in Michigan is a great deer to take. So even though there are areas you can shoot bigger deer, and that's for any state, but a good buck is a 100-inch buck here. And so how many guys are going to want to come and pay $150 or whatever the cost is for a non-resident fee to come hunt Michigan for a 100-inch caliber deer, when maybe they're from Illinois and 130 is R100 there?
Right.
Nobody wants to do that. So you have to also be able to understand, what genetics are in the area that you're hunting, and know that if you only got, say, a week designated to go and hunt an area, if a 130-inch buck walks out and you've put boots to the ground and scouted it, and that could be the buck you're after. I mean, it's or what's leaving the sign in the area. So you need to kind of know, and I don't like getting caught up in the inches game. I say inches, so it gives people an idea of what kind of a buck you're looking at. But we're an age structure. We're very age structure based. I mean, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I passed a 3.5-year-old low 140s this year because I want to see what he'll get into as a 4.5-year-old. Because I think he has a potential of being a close to Boone deer if he continues, because he's got the frame for it. He was a year too young, and normally I would have shot that deer hands down any day of the week. But I had seen 3 other deer in the area that were more mature and bigger than him,
Yeah.
rack wise. So that plays into a lot of those out of state, hunts too, is being able to talk to all those locals that have more, knowledge than what you're ever going to have, because they've been hunting it for 10 years or 5 years or however long they've been, and they know the area. So, that's what we do.
That's a great point. And I like that you brought that up. And is you can't be like intimidated to really network and reach out to as many people as possible, and just pound them until they're sick of fielding your questions, right?
Well, right, because you think of this way: if you don't ever ask, the answer is always no. So you got a 50% chance of somebody saying yes or no if you just ask. I mean, that's the worst thing that they're going to say is no. I'm sorry, I don't have any information for you.
Yeah, but there's so many different resources, like you said, a local outfitter, just a local successful hunter, a sporting goods shop, a gas
Yep.
station person that knows all the guys that come in and get coffee and go out to hunt every morning, you know?
That's a tip too, and it's just a side note to that, but it's okay. You see it happen a lot of times on the forums. A guy will post, "Hey, thinking about hunting Ohio. Has anybody got any information?" A lot of guys that are from Ohio that are on those forums that are elite level hunters or trying to be the best hunter that they can be, you won't see too many comments and posts on those posts. And I think a lot of it's because so many guys are so afraid
Oh, yeah.
that someone's going to hunt their area. You know what I mean? All their hard work that they've had in
Shielding and
so many times.
guarding
Yes,
information.
exactly. But um, you will find out more by actually calling the local DNR, the local archery shop, the local outfitter, because someone, whether it's an old timer who doesn't get to go out as much as he used to and works in the local archery shop, he's retired, he'll be more than willing to share information with you and tell you, and especially when you tell him, hey, I'm a non-resident, hunter looking to hunt there, and kind of give them a little bit of explanation of what you are. When guys find out that you're not going to Missouri to shoot a 4 point, you know what I mean? You're going after a caliber deer, and if you film or are associated with with any affiliates in the hunting industry, and explain to them what your goals are, they're more than willing to share with you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just find that when a lot of guys ask that information online publicly, you don't see a 50 guys raising their hand to say, yeah, come hunt, Coshocton County in Ohio.
Right.
The,
Yeah, well,
they're
you're asking like the competitors of a
right,
sport versus like the hosting
right.
party of the sport, what the rules are. Yeah, it's I can confirm that too because our good friend Ryan, they've been doing some out of state hunting the last couple of years, and he's really utilized the state resources, and
Yes,
I can confirm through him and then through my interactions with the state, this state and others, that those people are very much invested in seeing this thing go forward and seeing
right,
people utilize it. They are as invested as the most passionate hunter. A lot of times, these people that work for the states are
right.
taking.
And they're promoting their state.
Right,
You got
right,
to remember that do they want to sell? Those non-resident tags are a big source of income for those DNR or those states, and they're more than happy to have you hunt. Maybe the hunters of those states aren't, but the DNR, they are.
right,
They get to sell that $250 tag or that $150 tag, and they know for the most part most people that come are only coming for a limited time. And
right,
the hunters that do come, they're serious. Most guys aren't just making a trip to go hunt, let's say Iowa, after drawing for points and paying $750 to be able to have a legal means to hunt there. Those guys are going after a deer that they're not coming there to shoot a spike horn. You know what I mean? They're coming there to shoot a good caliber deer. And a lot of times those local businesses prosper from it too. And so they know that that's good revenue for them to come in, and they're more than willing to share with you, just like those archery shops. Because if you hunt a location close to one of those archery shops and they're friendly, what are you going to do if you need something? You're
right,
going to go to that archery shop. You know
right,
what I mean? You're going to go in there and talk to people
right.
and purchase things from them. And, so those kind of things can be great resources, not just maps, but making friends with somebody, and they'll be honest with you and share good quality information. I'm not going to tell you they're going to send you right to a tree, but they'll start giving you explanations of roads and how things are laid out, and then also it's a wonderful resource to find out what you need 100% to hunt areas, because some areas have to have special permits. Some areas you have to sign in the morning before you hunt them. If you don't know that and you just head down to an area, you're liable to get yourself a ticket or get yourself into some trouble, uh, because ignorance is no excuse.
Yeah.
And it's out there. They're there for you to call. It's just a phone call. It's just it don't take a lot of effort to get some of the answers that you're seeking before you make that endeavor.
I'll say this too, there is an easy way to set yourself apart from the general population of people who try to do this too, is by doing some small form of gratitude to
Mm-hmm.
repay that favor, whether it's dropping off a bag of beef jerky or publicly posting on Facebook that, hey, this person is a stand up person and they really helped me out. A nice comment, something like that goes a long ways. I know, you and I probably both are fans of Jared Scheffler, Whitetail Adrenaline. It's funny every year he has like a little couple minutes in there where he's driving around with a cooler dropping off cheese to all these people that have helped him in the years prior, whether it's with access to recover a deer or some type of information or something. And just, I think a lot of times people overlook how valuable that stuff is, and a form of gratitude just to say thank
Well,
you will
that
really put some things in your favor going forward.
that gratitude has been lost on the world with the sense of entitlement that a
That's
lot
a
of
that's a
people
great
have.
that's a
And
great
so
point.
from that aspect, saying thank you to somebody, it seems nowadays, without us going down this road, uh, that the word thank you has lost its effect because most people don't use it anymore.
Yeah.
And they don't show the appreciation level. And, you you might not think that the local biologist really gives a crap about you coming in there and thanking them. I can tell you personally from going in and thanking somebody and, you know, also relaying the information after hunting a location of what you saw in that area back to them, and feedback goes a long way for them. And they're you'll see them, they're almost shocked sometimes because 90% of people don't do that.
Yeah.
They're willing, they
Right.
want the information, but they're not willing to express the gratitude back, saying, thank you for, whatever it is that you did. It led to an encounter or a kill, or maybe you go back in there and say, hey, I hunted this area that you showed me, or that you told me about, and I didn't really see a whole lot in there. Even that little bit of information goes a long way,
Yeah,
especially when they're biologists.
you're 100% right, and I think a little bit of what it comes down to is just like I don't know, socialization challenges for people nowadays. I don't think it's that people generally don't want to say thank you. I think it's like a thing that maybe makes them a little uncomfortable, so they rather just avoid it. But that's where I was saying, like, you can really set yourself apart very easily if you're just willing to kick that uncomfortableness aside and spill it forward and just say thank you and return the favor in some way,
Because
because most percentage of people nowadays just
for
aren't willing to
whatever
do it.
reason, maybe they get too busy, or whatever it is. But we'll leave a note on the door, field office or something. Just say, hey, let them know today's our last day of our trip. We wanted to thank you for the information because for the next hunter coming along, whether it's you or me or someone else,
Good
you're
point.
helping pave the way. You know what I mean? You're helping because they're going to be more willing to share that information
Yeah.
with the next person or you again for next year. And it's just another hunting a contact that you have in your arsenal. I can tell you from experience, the area that I hunted in Ohio this year, we're going back and hunting it, we scouting it, but the local, he's not a biologist. Well, he's sort of, I wouldn't say he's a biologist, but he doesn't have the biologist title, but he is the sort of like the manager of the property.
Mhm.
And he knew me by name when I walked up and introduced myself to him. I mean, just by a couple conversations I had over the phone with him. And I think because of, me thanking him and it being, I know next year when I show up, he's going to recognize me. You
Sure.
know what I mean? He's going to know who I am. And to me, that goes a long way because that friendly interaction and that gratitude expressed, if he sees a good buck in an area, he's going to be willing to share it with me and say, hey man, we've seen this nice buck been frequent in this area, or there's been talk about this or this, and they're willing to do that because to them, most of those guys, it's not that they don't hunt, but most of those guys, because they work for the place that they're working for, they can't hunt those areas, or they have limited time because of their job, because during hunting season they're so busy and they don't have a personal relationship with a buck. You know what I mean? They don't see them like we do, as the trophy that we do. They see them from something different, from a standpoint. They're managing the property, and so that success and seeing you, it just makes their day go by just a little better. You know, they're happy to see you succeed.
Right. Yeah,
You
no,
know.
that's a great point about putting your best foot forward to kind of
Hmm.
pave the way for the next person that is willing to do so. And yeah, you got kids, you're invested in it, so you want it to,
Yep.
yeah,
Absolutely.
leave a good mark. That's
So
cool.
going back to the scouting the new areas and new states, I am this year, I am going to Missouri, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and then I will be putting in for Kansas this year to draw, and then I put my preference points in for Iowa. um and but those states are for sure I'm going to hunt. I don't know if I'm going back to Wisconsin or not, just because of the other states. I guess I'm having the opportunity to go and hunt.
Hmm.
um but I can tell you this 100%: we are going to scout Missouri. If that piece of Missouri doesn't show the promise that we think it's going to, or have hopes that it's going to, I'm not going to buy a non-resident tag and go hunt that place.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that I'm going to write it off and say, okay, well, the whole state of Missouri is no good. Um, but that's where I have to look in my budget and say, okay, you know, is it worth to go to another area in Missouri and take the gas and the time? Because, I know it's only a weekend, but you can really find a lot of good information out if you have a couple guys with you scouting that think like-minded, um, with you. And my advice, and I'm not trying to shy anybody away from it, but if you're going to do an out of state scout, bring someone with you that has some sort of knowledge or has killed some big deer and they can understand the read of the land. Do not just take someone who just wants to go, or is a fair weather hunter, or somebody that's a weak, doesn't really understand that, because you're shooting yourself in the foot, because you can so much more ground with someone who thinks like you do or hunts like you do, and you can trust their information. So
Right.
they're going to break down that section that they're scouting, because you can't always all just sit, all three of us, in the same area and walk it together. I mean, you lose out on a lot of really good sign. And so everybody has smartphones now with cameras. Everybody has access to Onyx Maps or Google, whatever the resource be, and you can take photos of an area. You can mark waypoints in on areas and cover so much more ground and cover a real good chunk of public. And then maybe the last day you're there, you can dive into the best areas out of those areas you found and really try to, you know, post it down to like everything that you need. So that way, when you do come back, and or for another scouting trip, if you need to button some things up, you already have a really good lay of the land. And for me, I like to look at all the road maps, because one of the things I encountered the first couple seasons when I hunted Wisconsin and in Ohio was just navigating through town and trying to figure out where my local Walmart was, where my local archery shop was, where the grocery stores are, the gas stations are open at 5 a.m. in the morning, or all those little things. Or if you're a guy who drinks a big brand of Red Bull, or something, in those areas that carry, for just to make that experience that much better,
Sure.
for you. So I mean, all those little details, and maybe it's because of the. I find that a lot of the guys that hunt mature bucks all have a lot of the same thing in common, in that they're pretty smart individuals. Like they have a technique or their own, you know, list of things that they look for that they do, and that's kind of why I think they're as successful as they are, is because they don't deviate from the plan, so to speak. Like, you know, they think outside the box, but they have a system that works for them and they use it continually, just like a baseball player getting ready for a game. You find out that the best pros always seem to do something specific, and they all share in that quality, that it's repetition that gets it to that point. So, you know, that for me, feeling comfortable and knowing my surroundings is huge when I go to hunt a lane, because it gives you confidence. You know, I mean, that wake up in the morning and you know, and go to the, you know, whatever your routine here is in Michigan, if that's where you're from, or Ohio or Kentucky, being able to try to set that same routine in the state that you're going to is a very big bonus for me. So it's something I really look for when I'm, you know, because it's just as important, you know, knowing, you know, maybe knowing the local, because, you know, you got to look at your state regulations on when you know, not just hunting a deer, but when you shoot one, how do you bring it back to the state of Michigan?
Right.
Because you can't just bring a whole deer back.
Right. Right. Right.
You know, so finding that local processor, you know, a lot of them have 800 numbers to call once you harvest within 24 hours, or everything that you got to do that plays into to play in that. Um, but it's the same principles once you get there and you've done your research, you've done your aerial scouting, you've done every other thing. Once it comes time to put boots on the ground, you have to do the same thing you did to the new areas as you do your old areas. Find out all the food sources, you know, and that might even be sitting down for an hour with the local biologist and asking them, what do deer browse on here? What is, you know, and what does this plant look like? Or what does this bush look like? Um, you know, finding out, you know, if there's acorn trees in an area, you know, those things go a long, long way. And we're from Michigan, so what's native here isn't always native there. So you need to like keep yourself educated on what those are too, and, you know, shift to that style of food source for them. And then also, you know, you can research once you find out, like, let's say it's dogwood, look up dogwood, find out when it blooms, find out when it's, you know, whatever, when it yields what it's yielding, and you'll get a good time frame of when an area that might be holding it might be paying off.
Right.
So, you know, that's a big, to me, that's a big thing. And then, you know, pounding those boots on the ground and looking for hunter sign, for hunter pressure, for entrance exit strategies. And I got to tell, to me, that's the most important thing once you find an area, is how you're going to access that area, like
So
how you're going to get in and out. Oh,
let's do this.
you know,
You kind of already alluded to and started already going down the path, but we're getting to 90 minutes, and our closing discussion, it doesn't have to be shortchanged, but I think what a good way to frame this is, because you're talking on Missouri and you're getting ready to go down there. Why don't you kind of go through in depth, like what your start to finish boots on ground is going to be for this particular hunt? You know what I mean? What do you plan on doing the second you pull in to the second you pull out? What do you hope to get accomplished?
well, we've already, like I said, did a lot of the things, or all the things that I've shared with it, with, you know, with everybody. So for us, realistically, 130-inch caliber deer is what we're after. Anything 130 and above. And with regards to age too, I mean, we're looking for a mature buck, but in that frame, I'm trying to give everybody kind of an idea. So soon as I get there, that first morning, we're going to get up early in the morning, and we're going to drive around all the roads and look at the private adjacent pieces for agricultural fields. We're probably going to stop and talk to a couple farmers in the area as well. Get some information out, and you never know, maybe being able to if we do shoot a deer and it happens to run in there, gain permission and to just come on there, maybe not hunt it, but because we're pretty big on the public land, 10,000 acres, I'm pretty sure we can locate a good buck or two in the area. But just getting a little bit of an idea, because they'll tell you, hey, this parking lot gets a lot of people in it, so we'll know some areas that might, and also they know, them farmers know what caliber deer are roaming their fields too, so.
Sure, sure.
And then once we find all the public parking lots on the because sometimes not everything shows up on a map, um and it doesn't. There's sometimes parking lots or areas, or you'll find that there's a parking lot, but it's got a two track that you can drive back in a mile in. And so we'll be designated finding all those areas and then put on the ground. And, we'll probably spend the first part of the day learning the area and how it's laid out, by driving around and then looking at area. And we'll be looking at the roads and the tracks and the runs going across into it. And then basically it'll be getting out and using our Onyx maps and dissecting every area we can, marking rub lines, marking bedding areas, uh, elevation changes, transition lines, even the transition lines that don't show up on the map, because we like to call them like super transitions, where you have like multiple transition areas in the same area, because you can transition from uh, like say an oak flat into a swamp area, or a marsh grass, and then that can also have transition of red brush areas inside it. So uh, we'll be diagnosing all of those and then looking at your pressure, looking for trees that have climber marks in them, or old stands that are still set up, uh, trash on the ground, those kind of things, and pretty much tromping through the whole entire woods looking for, and we'll be looking for sheds too, because it should be about that time that they're, we've been seeing online that guys are starting to find sheds in those areas.
Mhm.
um and sort of looking for all that sign. And then the last day will probably, like I said, take the best areas that we found and try to like really dive into them and see if we missed anything. And then you will pick our entrance exit strategies, um, potential kill trees, mark them. You know what I mean, on the Onyx map to save them. So the thing with Onyx that people don't understand is it's not going to take you to the specific tree, but it'll put you in the general area. You know what I mean, as where you're pretty close to.
Yeah.
And then we'll be talking to the biologist in the area or the local DNR, finding out all the information that we can find out from, how to bring a deer out of the state of Missouri, the local taxidermists, the local processors, any information we can find, the local campgrounds, and then trying to find out where we're going to stay, whether it's worth it to pull a camper and drive there, or if it would be cheaper to stay in like a Airbnb, or there's somebody in the area that they might have a small home or a trailer for rent,
Mhm.
stuff like that. Like finding out all that information to make our trips as inexpensive as they can when we're there.
Sure.
And when if you're going to pull a camper, do they have water, electricity, you know, all the information, your showers, how to wash your clothes, if you're going to be there for an extended stay, those all those factors, just like you would be if you were at home. You literally can make a list of what you would do here. That same list needs to be what you do there, except for you're in foreign territory. So now you got to familiarize yourself with where you can get those done.
Right.
So it's there. You know what I mean? That's kind of what we're doing with that. Um, so it's exciting because that's what we're doing with every state, and I will be doing informational pieces that we will release on our website and on YouTube. Uh, with it might be 15-minute segments, but there might be a part one, a part two, a part three. so we can get as much information as we possibly can there. And I don't expect to be able to, during that trip, of being able to put a lot of, pictures or video footage of big bucks standing around, because it's, they should be dropping by then, or it'd be, be done. But it's the informational part that we're going to be focusing on, so other guys can, and that stuff translates to Michigan too. Just because it's another area doesn't mean that the sign we're reading and how we're hunting it and what we're doing doesn't translate or correlate over to each state that you do. It's just a different terrain feature or food source or whatever, but it's still the same principles.
Do you think traveling out of state and looking at different pieces has helped you when you do come home, like revisit things that do you look at things differently that you might not otherwise have in the past, or is
I
Michigan?
think it's the other way around.
Yeah, I wondered.
I think it's the other way around. And really, most guys that I know that do the out of state hunting, it's the other way. Like, we are one of the hardest states to hunt. I mean, if you look at statistics, we're in the top 5 of yearling, bucks killed, number of hunters. And that's skewed even because the Upper Peninsula, compared to the lower half, we that's included in it, and there's nowhere near the number of hunters as in the Lower Peninsula in those results. So, I mean, even though that's there, I'm not by no means saying we're the hardest state to hunt, but we're one of the
Yeah,
hardest.
well, I mean, if you put the numbers down, we are. I mean,
Yeah,
we might not
that's
be
what I'm
always be
saying.
number one, but we're right there. It's a struggle
We're always in the top, and like I said, you don't see a lot of people.
traveling,
Uh, you don't see a lot of people coming to Michigan.
which I'm cool with.
Well, I mean, I am, but I'm not though. You know what I mean? Because at the same time, like,
I get that.
realistically, I would love to see some of the bigger name people in the industry come to some public land in Michigan and hunt Michigan and put more information down that depicts hunting that everyone can reach. If you're trying to reach everyone, that not everybody has prime real estate to hunt and can pass 140 caliber deer. And yes, it's entertaining, but you've noticed the shift in the last 4 or 5 years to reality based hunting,
Yeah.
which is the everyman hunting.
It
And
might help out when the industry as a whole focuses on the
yes,
experience, not the result.
yes,
That's when Michigan will
yes.
gain popularity, and that's beginning to happen. And I will agree with you in that fact. But I had this conversation and somewhat of an argument with a friend that lives in a different state, and I said I take a lot of value in the fact that we don't have to combat with a lot of out of state hunters because we already have enough to combat here
I
with
think
just
I've
the
seen a
in-state hunters, but I understand a balance in that if there was an
well
older age
because
structure, maybe
I I
being able to
feel like
capitalize on the funds coming in would be,
well,
uh,
that's what I was, what I'm getting to is that if it started becoming more prevalent in the reality based shows where guys are coming here and that out of state revenue, and the DNR started to see that from a financial standpoint, that helps us too. Like
right.
that's why those states are able to do what they can do and have the quality management. And I think we could get on a discussion about Michigan's management of their whitetail herd, and have a separate podcast on that alone. But and I know that there's some changes that need to take place for Michigan to be on that level of eliteness where people want to come and travel this state to hunt it.
Right.
And the opportunities are here, but under our current system, we don't have any protected deer here in Michigan.
There's a lot of
And that
opportunity
needs
to,
to change.
yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to come here and enjoy an experience. There's a lot of opportunity to come here and probably go home with deer, but if the if the end result and the hope is to come and take an older ager class deer, which it's going to be if people are spending money and investing time, then this
Right.
won't be a destination.
Well, my point in it is whenever you hear of anyone in the industry talk about Michigan, they talk about Michigan in a negative sense. And I'm not saying that they have to speak in it in a positive sense. Don't call it what it isn't. But there is, like I said, the non-resident sales for licenses aren't jumping off the page to people to come and hunt here. And, and that's because of, like I said, there's no protected deer here. And the for a deer to make it to 3.5 years old in this state, not on a managed piece of private land, but on public land, that's a huge deer here. You know what I
Sure.
mean? That's a great caliber deer. And a lot of people are starting to find out that a 3.5-year-old deer or a 4.5-year-old deer here can very easily carry 105-inch rack, or a 90-inch rack. I score a lot of deer that I shoot. Um, not just to put them in the books, but to find out, from year to year, how old was this deer? What did he score?
Sure.
To know that what that area is kind of producing, so to speak. And that's something that's part of the reason why we started From Bed to Dead in the first place, was because we educate our hunters here in Michigan, also bring to light what Michigan has to offer for some of these other outfits and hunting places, that will come here and do some. Because if you look at it, there's a lot of videographers and people in the industry here in Michigan. But if you look at the caliber deer that are getting put on the ground, or the information and the content that's in the videos, a lot of it still is private based hunting. A lot of it isn't public land with information on exactly how to get on deer. You have a hunt and somebody's videoing it, but they're not really explaining the food source. They're not really explaining why they hunted the area that they did. Because a lot of people are scared to put that content out there, because then somebody might be hunting their area or you're giving away it. But we're trying to put it out there, because if we educate someone, a hunter, and we are based, I wouldn't say we're based on an elite level hunter based, but we're definitely based on how to read the sign and take the best deer your area has to offer. And so if we can change even 1,000 people's mindset to not shooting the very first year and a half old 8 point because you want your restricted tag, and you can learn your area and learn what the area has to offer, you're benefiting everyone that hunts that area by passing the deer you normally wouldn't pass, because you have the confidence to take a better quality deer,
Right.
or knowing how to hunt an area so that other people as well can come in and hunt it and have success, not just burning bridges left and right, or shooting immature deer, or uh, you know being smarter about how you hunt an area, so you don't educate the deer, so that other people that hunt you and me, or John Smith down the road, has the opportunity when he goes out to hunt it too.
Yeah, I think
And
a testament to that is that what you're talking about, yourself, your group, and other groups, the QDMA puts numbers out that kind of verifies that that's happening, right? I think
it
the
is,
annual buck harvest, the age structure has been better than it has ever been in the
it's
past, and it's just
it
doing
is.
that by people gaining and obtaining knowledge and applying it, I would guess.
And the thing is that we, our group From Bed to Dead, we are networking with all people in the industry. You know what I mean? With people who are in Indiana, with people who are in Ohio, with people who are in Missouri, all the states, including our local guys here, and sitting down with them at the shows, and introducing yourself, reaching a hand out to them in any way that you can help bring this subject to light, to get the information out there, and work hand in hand with these people, um, to better our state and to get the knowledge out there, so that way people feel more confident and they have better opportunities. I'm specifically right now, I've been interacting with a gentleman who's been hunting an area that I've been hunting, He's never shot a buck with a bow, and he's been hunting for 30 years,
Mhm.
and he's never shot a buck with a bow. And I'm
That's
gonna be
crazy.
going, and I know it's crazy, but there's a
I,
lot of people out
yeah,
there that are like that. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, I know the
And
realization of
so
that.
and people, a lot of our listeners, if your podcast and other people who are going to hear this are probably going to be like, what in the world? But that's reality. A lot of guys, because of family or other work obligations, don't have the time to put forth, even though they want the results. And I'm willing to share my time, you know contact me via Facebook or off Instagram, or even, my phone number is on my page for people to contact me and get a hold of me. And I've put myself out there so that way, I want to help. And so I'm willing to take a day or two out of my time and go and scout an area, or even uh, share areas that I've hunted in the past, that have been well, or that will, and the first thing I always ask is, what's your goal? What is your goal this year? Is it to obviously everybody will always say, I want to shoot a big buck, but some people's goals aren't that way. It's to shoot their first deer with a bow. It's to shoot their first buck with a bow. It's to learn how to shoot that, or be in a position. It could be something as silly as how to set their stand. A lot of guys are new to mobile hunting, and they don't know what kind of equipment should I be looking for. And you hear it all the time. Guys are always posting like, let's see your setups. The knowledge is out there, and the thirst for people to try to learn is there, but we need more people willing to share that information, and true information, not the phony, yeah, go hunt this area, even though, it might not be a good area, because I don't want that person hunting in my area, but being willing to share it in the knowledge with people, because at some point that's what someone did for us. Not, I guarantee you, if you look back at, you know, 9 out of 10 guys that are hunting, someone mentored them along the way. Somebody was willing to share their knowledge. Somebody was willing to talk about. Somebody was willing to show them what they were missing, or lend a hand of help. And that is exactly what we are doing for us. And that's where I'm at in my hunting uh, place in time right now. Is, yes, I love shooting big bucks, and I love being able to go to out of state, and being able to harvest 4 or 5 different bucks in a year, uh, from other places. But I get just as much enjoyment out of meeting up with somebody for the first time and going to their area, because I'm not going to hunt their area. You know what I mean? That's just not how I am. But I will go there and scout that area with them, show them how I would read an area in hopes. And I keep that constant communication, because of numerous times I get a screenshot during season of a guy who shot his best buck, or his first buck, or first doe, or a video clip of them having an encounter that they otherwise wouldn't normally have. And that is, to me, means more than the buck I shoot on the ground. So it's a big help for me. And we don't post that for personal recognition or anything from other people. We'll post their deer and stuff, but we don't always tell all the storylines and backdrops with it, because it's not that we don't need personal recognition from it. It's just, it does make you feel well as a hunter. And I know Leon's the same way. We've been putting ourselves out there to help other guys answer questions, and if I could, it's nice, because during this time of the surgeries and everything that's been happening with me, I've had a lot of time on my hands, and I've spent it having conversations with numerous people about their areas or fielding questions. And I never turn anybody away. I might not get to your response, if you send us a message right then and there, that first hour, but eventually at some point I will, and I will get in depth as much as I can, and discuss as much as I possibly can, even dedicating my personal time to drive to those places with these people and share with them, or even share if I'm not planning on hunting a specific area, I will share that with somebody, because I want to see them be successful too. So, that's kind of, where I'm at. And believe it or not, having my two kids, I have a 16-year-old daughter and my son will be 13 this month. Sitting down and explaining to them everything that I take advantage of, I guess, or I walk through the woods and I'm with another person, I see things that maybe somebody else doesn't, and it registers in my mind, even though it doesn't come out in my words to somebody. And I take for granted that. And having my kids with me has really prepared me for being able to explain step by step things that I share with the public.
Yeah, I gather that.
And it really has taken it down, broken it down to a basic level.
Sure.
So I can actually get in depth with certain things and explanations, and get to it. And where I'm very, very thankful for the people that have come into my life, with you, uh, um, a gentleman by the name of Byron, and Dave. They're with the Whitetail Experience, Cody DeQuisto, and a lot of other guys that no one even knows who they are. And their discussions and their information and the willingness to share it, as well as help others, it just blows my mind how connected the hunting community can really be when
Right.
everyone's on the same page, trying to share that information with the public, with John Smith down the road, with you, with me, and getting that information out there to help better people and to make them aware, that a do-it-yourself hunt is much more affordable than you think. You don't need thousands of dollars to go to these trips.
Right.
You know, you don't, and you can still be successful, and you can still involve your family, and included with it, and you don't have to upset the balance of your life of work, and that of all your responsibilities and everything else, because for the most part we all have those responsibilities and things that we have to do, so you have to prioritize them. But you can, I always hear people say constantly all the time, like, I just don't have the time to do it. If this is something that you truly really pursue and want to do, you have to make time. You have to figure out ways to incorporate that time. Take your wife with you when you go scouting. Take your kids with you when you go scouting. Take your hunting partners, your brother, your dad. Um, Meet up with other guys who are like minded. And don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Um, because you're always going to have people that are gonna love you, and then they're gonna hate you too.
Right.
And you know you got to learn to be able to block that, and keep the positive. And I always take, even out of our negative experiences that we have, I always take the positive from that, and because there always are positives from that, and use those down the road. And I share that with my kids as well, so that way it betters them along the way. And it's just, like I said, I really feel blessed. I think the accident really woke me up, and everyone has a place in the hunting community, and even the smallest person makes the biggest dent. So, from my standpoint, I'm very thankful for you and your podcast and the people that you get on your show, and that are willing to share their information, and the genuine conversation that takes place with people. It's amazing. And I know you get it all the time, but still, I want to thank you,
Well,
and everyone that supports, Deer Hunter podcast. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to a lot of people.
yeah, and I think that's a good way to wrap this conversation and podcast up. I'm in complete agreement. Yeah, going forward, I think hopefully sooner than later it won't be as long as it was last time. But I know you've brought up Leon a couple times, and we'll coordinate uh, and schedule something where we can all physically hook up and sit down and do
Yeah,
another do
get your
another.
brother there with us too, because I remember the last time we had it, you said that you wanted your brother to, all of us to kind of get together and
Yep.
discuss some things, and I'm looking forward to that as well, because we talked about out of state and scouting, but I am like dying to be able to get into some of the more uh, nuts and bolts aspect of hunting, of our experience, like last year, like what we learned, and some of our encounters, in some of the stories that we have, and then the stories from you guys. Your season went, and I know you had the video of the forest, that everybody went to in Grand Rapids, and there was a great turnout there that showed up. But hearing how your recap went, and just being able to talk about some of that, because I know people love the stories. They love the learning a little more than just the scouting aspect of it, but to being able to break down specifics. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I know Leon is as well. So
Well, we are on the exact same page then, and we'll convene and look at a time and date, figure out something sooner than later. But yeah, it's exciting. It's the beginning of a new season. It starts now. That's why I wanted to have this conversation
yeah,
now with you and just start
yeah.
getting people's marbles turning in their head, thinking, what do I need to be doing right now so that I feel
Well,
prepared
yeah,
come
yep.
November, October, December.
Yep. I mean, and I'll take a 30-second here, but if any one of your listeners and anybody hearing this podcast hasn't checked us out on Facebook or on Instagram at From Bed to Dead, please do. We're going to have a lot of new content that's going to be popping up in video footage of setups of deer, of our scouting, our out of state stuff, and can kind of follow along, because not only just the podcast and the information, but being able to visually see it take place is huge. At least for me, I'm a big visual guy. When you can actually get in depth and explain a few things that go from there. So if anybody hasn't yet, please come and check us out. Feel free to message us. Leon or I will, usually within a couple hours, get a hold of you. No skill level is is ever shut out. It doesn't matter if you've not even shot your first deer, if you're looking for your first buck, doe, you just have questions on an area, or you're trying to put pieces together on a target buck, or the best bucks, or do it yourself, out of state hunts, anything, please feel free to contact us. We are more than willing to help. And the information is free and readily available. So, hopefully we'll get to be able to meet a few of you guys out there and be able to have some good conversation and extend uh, our circles even farther. So,
Well, on that, thank you, Jason. I will link all your guys' social media and your contacts directly in the show notes to this podcast, so everyone will be able to
awesome.
find that information there. And then I'll be in touch soon, and we'll go from there. Thanks, dude.